All right. Well, it looks like it's 2 p.m. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to everybody that we have in attendance today. If you are familiar with our Sure Resource Center here at the University of Kentucky, we welcome you back. And if you're a first-time attendee, we are funded by the National Institute of General Medical Sciences to help support the Sure R16 grant program. We offer trainings twice a month in most cases, one faculty focused and one focus for our research administrators. And so today we have Dr. Chris Monahan with us, who is going to take a look at organizing an Office of Sponsored Programs for Success.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you all of you for joining us for this session. We're hoping that this will be somewhat interactive. We'll have a couple of polls, but in terms of questions, I'll probably be taking those at the end. Melissa will share those with me when we get to the end of the session. I'm so excited to be here with you to share about organizing an Office of Sponsored Programs for Success. Our goal today is to look at how you deliver sponsored programs at your institution, how you structure that and deliver it, discuss some different models so that you'll be able to go back and think about how you might want to do this, maybe how you might want to restart things, and importantly, how you're going to develop strategies for enhancing faculty-focused support to be able to reduce administrative burden and increase support of faculty. Our role in the OSP office is to build this capacity, provide incentives, support faculty, as well as maintain compliance for our institutions. So that's what we'll be focused on. We're going to jump right in. I do want to tell you a little bit about me and why I'm here chatting with you about these. I've been in the profession of research administration for about a lot of years, maybe more than 20. And I've been at 3 different predominantly undergraduate institutions: Bridgewater State University, which was a public teaching-focused institution; Wellesley College, a women's college in Massachusetts. Again, wasn't just a PUI, it was only an undergraduate institution. And I came to Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a Catholic liberal arts school, in 2011. And they brought me here from Wellesley, which I absolutely loved. And what I came here to do was to create an Office of Sponsored Programs where one didn't exist. There were some faculty who were interested in pursuing grants. The college was a teaching-focused institution that was really looking at expanding and knew that research and undergraduate research specifically was an important part of teaching, an important outcome of teaching, and wanted to develop some infrastructure to be able to support that and to become successful with grants. So I came here and I'm happy to say after 11 years, we've grown a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done here, but to kind of talk more broadly about strategies. I am currently the Vice President-Elect of NCURA, the National Council for University Research Administrators, which is a professional society of research administration that provides professional development support. There are other professional societies as well. One of the roles that I had with NCURA prior to my current role as president-elect is I was the former director of their peer review program, which is a program that goes out and does a peer review against national standards for effective sponsored programs of sponsored program officers across the United States. I focused on smaller institutions, and by smaller, I would say those that are doing under $15 million. That was my primary focus, although I did do reviews at some larger schools as well. So I've been able to travel around the country, go out to many schools and perform one of these external reviews as part of a team process at many places, and have seen lots of different structures, lots of similar challenges, and also some successes as well. I also do teach in Providence College's Master of Higher Education program. I teach research methods. I love doing that, although my time is stretched. And I have a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in assisting underrepresented faculty and institutions succeed. So that's a lot about me. Let's kind of get into this meat. First thing I want to do, since I've told you a little bit about me, if you could tell me a little bit about you, that would be great. We'll be launching a poll here. And please just take a few minutes and let me know which of these roles best suits you, so I have a sense of the audience and how to tailor my comments. And it looks like those responses are coming in. They're still coming, and we'll close the poll in just about 5 seconds or so. That's a long time in the virtual world. Okay, I think we could close the poll at this point, and we'll share those results. So it looks like about 3/4 of you are an OSP staff member at some level. And we've got 11% of you are academic administrators. We have some faculty that are here, and then some others. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. That gives me a sense of who I'm talking to. And my slide is not advancing.
You want to exit and try to open it back up?
Yep. Okay, bear with me all. The slides are stuck. Melissa, we won't launch the other poll since it's giving me a little bit of technical difficulties. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to reshare and see if that helps.
It looks great.
We're back. Research administrators can pivot quickly and easily and solve problems. So in putting an office together, choosing an office name should reflect the functions and focus of the office. On your screen are some typical names you might see for offices like ours, and they shift a little bit depending on the focus of the office. So some may only call themselves a grants office. Some focus on research and will call themselves the research support or research office or some kind of research services. Where I've had other institutions lean away from research if they're at an institution that is not maybe fully focused, and they do a lot of sponsored programs outside of direct research. So they might pick an office of sponsored programs or sponsored projects so that people come to the office not just for help with their research, but for their scholarship more generally, and that it's more open for all disciplines, even those outside of the sciences. Occasionally you might see services under a faculty support or a faculty development office. Research development would be more for the pre-award or developing the research idea. And then sponsored projects and research compliance. Again, the name should be reflective of the functions that you and services that you'll be providing and the message that you want to provide to your faculty. The structure of an office, where it sits, how you put it together, really conceptually fits into these 4 areas. That's the mission of your institution. Are you an emerging research institution? Are you teaching focused? Are you just focused on nursing or a professional area? Is your goal to grow research? What is the mission? What do you see? Are you still rooted in some teaching? Resources, what kind of resources you're going to put into the office and how you're going to staff it. The scale, how big are you now? How big do you want to be? And then the culture, where does it fit culturally within the institution? Is there a place where research resides? At many smaller institutions, there is not, like a vice president for a research office, because research hasn't been established as a primary function. But at many predominantly undergraduate institutions, the teacher-scholar model is something that's in place. So research is critical and important, but it's critical and important for the betterment of teaching and for the betterment of scholarship. And if that's the case, the office may sit in academic affairs. And some more specific factors that can impact your structure is the size and location of your institution itself. Are you one campus? Are you multiple campuses? Are you located in an area where faculty come in person? Is it remote work? All of these kinds of things can impact the organizational structure that you decide and how you want to deliver your services. Certainly, the volume of your research is going to impact how you structure the service that you provide in the operations. If you're a tiny organization, it may be that you're starting with a core 1 or 2 people. Whether or not you have electronic systems and whether systems talk to each other can definitely impact the structure that you put together. You'll see as we move on, I'll talk a little bit about risk tolerance, how much risk tolerance your institution has. There is a degree of risk that comes with accepting federal awards and doing sponsored research, especially for institutions that are newer or more naive to the work. Understanding what your risk tolerance is important and may impact where you put emphasis in terms of staffing and in terms of growth. And then finally, another factor that will impact the structure that you ultimately select for your institution or that you might decide to move to is whether you're going to have a centralized or decentralized approach. So at many larger institutions, you would have an approach where you would have research administrators that are seated out in the departments, working hand in hand with faculty, working closely with them to submit proposals. And all of those come up to a central office that manages more of the overall pre-award processes. And some smaller institutions, and I'll say even some larger, are moving to moving away from the decentralized. You could have more centralized, where there's one place that people come to, that they get consistent report. It's central. At many institutions, as they're beginning to grow or beginning to evolve with sponsored programs, they start with some kind of centralized, whether it's a person that sits centralized, that begins coordinating activities until things grow. And then eventually you may see some decentralization in some pockets of excellence that exist in the college, in the university or the college, where someone might pop up to support in an individual school or so. So these are all factors that are going to impact how you put this support together. There's lots of components, this is referencing back to the initial slide that we looked at, that feed into determining the organizational model that you're going to implement or you might decide to rework. And I'm going to show you an example of a school that reworked their organizational chart recently because some of their needs had changed. It's like anything else. As you start developing something and you start getting feedback from stakeholders and start seeing what's working and assess your metrics, things are going to shift and change. And what you might set out as your original organizational structure should evolve, grow, and change over periods of time to match what the needs of the institution are. So one thing that we keep in mind is the divisional reporting lines. Some sponsored programs offices will be in academic affairs, maybe reporting to a provost. Or in larger places, a VP for research. It could be in fundraising or development or institutional advancement. Many small institutions might start with sponsored research and sponsored faculty sort of as fundraising and development, and it may start there. But I've seen many institutions that have started it there, many small liberal arts schools that will then maybe migrate it over time to academic affairs, where they see it more as a faculty development function rather than a fundraising function. So again, thinking about how do you see grants and sponsored programs? How do you see faculty research? That should impact where you place its support. Certainly business affairs and finance, right? We don't have grants and we don't have federal funding without money and money coming in that needs to be managed appropriately. Yes, we've got to get the grants, but we also have to be building an infrastructure where we can manage them and watch them grow. Some institutions might actually start with, individual faculty out there getting grants, and then they're just managed on the back end in finance. That's what my institution was like before I arrived and created the office. And I've even seen, you'll see, I've run into a few schools that it reports to the president directly because it was a presidential initiative or charge. And I've also seen some schools where risk was a real focus, where they've even had it report to general counsel. I'll talk about the most common models in the next slide, but the divisional reporting lines are key. You have to think about the functions or the services that you want to provide. What do you want to provide right away? And usually most schools want to provide the research development and proposal development support to be able to get the proposals out the door right away. It's common sense, right? Start at the beginning, start working with faculty to get things in. And some institutions do a great job of this, but then they forget that this is whole back end: award acceptance and negotiation, award management, financial compliance, non-financial compliance, all these other pieces that have to be considered as well. So we have to sort of grow and balance the pre and the post award support. But thinking about, do we want to be an office that just processes paperwork, or do we want to meet with faculty and develop ideas? Are we going to have boilerplate, or are we going to expect faculty to do those things? I have my own take on some of these things, but your institution has to think about what you want to do. And I'll be sharing a little bit more about our emphasis here and why I think it's work that we've done a lot of faculty development work, research development work, and spent a lot of time in that area. The institutional culture is important. How important is research for scholarship and promotion at your institution? It's a question you have to ask yourself, because it's going to impact how you support faculty research. You have to look at the philosophy of sponsored research. Is it faculty development, or is it revenue development? What philosophy does your institution have? Or is it a little bit of both? Or is it revenue development for the betterment of faculty and student development? These are just important questions to be having at the institution as you develop your strategic plan. Your institutions have strategic plans, and making sure that the strategic plan for your office aligns with strategic planning in your institutional culture is important, because that's how you get the support to see these structures grow. And then finally, what pulls all these things together are linkages and strengths with key institutional offices. Sponsored programs offices are sort of like the center that helps faculty connect with all these other important offices on campus to get the work done once you get that award. So you have to have a good relationship with general counsel, human resources, payroll, purchasing. And if you have an undergraduate research office or some kind of student engagement office, all of those relationships are important to help the whole system grow. We like to think about research as a research enterprise. And the role of the sponsored programs office is to help support the research enterprise. And we do that not just by pushing the papers to get the grants out the door, but by making these connections and helping faculty reduce the administrative burden to be able to get the proposals in and the work done. So I like to say that there's 3 different types of sponsored program offices: a startup or a restart office, those that are under 3 years in length. You're building infrastructure. In those first 3 years, it takes time. You've got to get the name out of your office, establish norms. I would also say that many offices could be a restart, meaning they had something, it wasn't working, you decided to restart it. Those first couple of years, there's just a lot of work of building relationships, infrastructure, policies, procedures, and communicating those effectively with faculty. The next group I would say are emerging. I won't put any particular time level on it, but by emerging, I mean your reputation has been developed as an office. Your grant portfolio and reach are growing. You have some core policies and procedures are established. Faculty know that there's a routing process. You've got core research policies in place, but you still haven't reached your potential. There's still more to be done. And then I would say an established office is one where you've got a reputation established. And when I say reputation, I mean your faculty know that you're a go-to office, what your office does, what you can do, what you can't do, and how you can help. And it takes a lot to establish that reputation. It takes multiple forms of communication. Your portfolio should grow, and it may even level off, because thinking back to what I've said previously, you have to look at your institution. If your institution's goal was to grow research, like by how much? Or some institutions, their goal is not to grow research. I've been to many institutions, their goal is to support faculty to pursue their research. And if it grows, that's great. And usually those two things do come hand in hand. And you should have policies and procedures and functions that are established and integrated. Then you know that you're an established office. People know where to go, they know who to talk to, and things are processing and without question. And so what you see on the screen is the poll we're not going to do, but I'll ask you when we go live later to maybe share how many of you in each of these situations. So when I talk about the sponsored programs functions, we have to overlay those into the culture that we talked about before. So you have like an infrastructure, a culture, and you have to think about the functions that an office does. And this image shows a function of, the whole life cycle, from finding funding to working on developing the proposal, submitting it, negotiating the award, setting up the project, etc., all the way to the award closeout. So it's a full process. What might be missing from this circle here is what happens before finding funding, which is developing that research idea, getting faculty enthused and engaged. That's the work that we call research development. It's what I like to call the pre-award. It's really facilitating a culture where faculty have time, space, and encouragement and support by the institution to even think about the ideas and think about how they want to work with students or graduate students to be able to achieve these ideas. And then the find funding. For me, I spent a lot of time at the early parts when we were a startup. I stayed right at the beginning of helping people identify projects and ideas and helping them develop them, helping them find collaborators, making connections across our institution, but also some other partners, so that we could start developing competitive proposals. So we weren't in a place to develop competitive proposals unless we had competitive teams. So we spent time developing those. So when you're putting together your infrastructure, you've really got to think about all the different pieces. Who's going to do those pieces? How much of it will land on faculty, the investigator? What does the sponsor request or require? What's the regulatory environment? And what does my institution want to put into it? Because we have to be able to invest enough to get us through the whole cycle all the way to award closeout. it's not okay to get people all excited about submitting grants and not provide any support for them to manage their awards, to walk through processes, invoicing, the stuff that people don't want to think about, that boring stuff. It's actually the most important part of the award to keep things moving. And it's where a lot of faculty can get tripped up and get frustrated and maybe not come back and want to reapply if they're not having positive experiences throughout the life cycle. Here are some common organization models for offices of sponsored programs at small institutions. Pre and post award, right? So pre was the first half of that circle on the previous slide, from finding funding all the way to submitting that award. Sometimes award negotiation is in the pre-award. And post-award, both reporting to academic affairs. So that's one model. So that's both areas together, not split. You could have pre and post together, reporting to an institutional advancement or fundraising office, development office. I've seen that at many small schools. Pre and post together, reporting to an office of business affairs. I've seen common at some small schools. I will say in that third model where we're reporting to business affairs or finance, some of what I hear from faculty when I go to institutions like that is that they're missing that people are really connected. It's more of a business transaction rather than an academically supported activity, and they don't really know if. So that's, I think, one of the downsides of both pre and post being in finance. Obviously, you've got the whole second part of the wheel covered pretty well in business and finance. What I see a lot is some kind of hybrid where the pre-award is reporting either to academic affairs or institutional advancement, or sometimes a combo of both. I've also seen an office of college grants that is both academic affairs and institutional advancement grants for the pre-award, and then all post-award being handled by business and finance. So I call that sort of a hybrid split between two different divisions of the institution. These things are tricky because when we split responsibilities across divisions of institution, we have different priorities among different leadership within divisions. And depending on the institutions, again, goal, clear stated vision, and strategic plan, it can be a little tricky. It can also work out quite well if you've got shared vision and you've got great communication across teams. So at Providence College, again, I started as a one-person operation 11 years ago, and I want to share with you what we have now. We've decided to move to a hybrid where I am the senior director, actually. I gave myself a demotion on the slide, reporting up to the provost and VP for academic affairs. This was important to my school. We wanted to send a strong message that this was an academic endeavor, and we wanted to support the research enterprise, faculty, and student undergraduate research. And then under me, I now have an assistant director. We have a grad assistant. We occasionally use a faculty fellow. It's a good way to use faculty to communicate with other faculty. Have an advisory committee made up of faculty who are really informing the services that we provide and giving us feedback on where we can make improvements. And then I also, because we're a small school, do research compliance and handle the IRBI at Cook and IBC. Now we're hybrid because in our vice president in finance and administration, what you see on the right side, this is where our our financial services and grants management sits. We started with like 0.5 of a person, and that was the only person we had in grants. Again, they added me. We built up the pre-award side. And now this year, we added a second post-award person. Our growth has actually gone up 635% in the last 4 years across all sponsors. So we're pretty happy with that. And the downside of many hybrid organizations is that there isn't good communication between the finance division that wants to like be stuck to numbers. And then, us on the academic side who are just all about not thinking about the numbers. Well, that's not the case with my team. We actually have created cross-cutting grant teams across both areas. This is why the hybrid works. So we report up to different VPs, but the VPs have shared vision and we have shared goals at the institution. And we have monthly team meetings across all the areas, and we do joint communications and work together to make sure that we're servicing the whole cycle as a whole cycle, not just my unit and their unit or their unit and my unit. We have to run it together in order for this hybrid to work. What I'm showing you on the screen is another school. I actually went out to one of my listservs and asked them to share with me their different organizational models. So this is one school that started like our school. They had grown a little bit and they had developed hybrid, one side reporting to provost, the pre-award, one side reporting to VP for finance. And what works for me wasn't working for them. I thought this looked great. And they said, you know what, it really wasn't working. We had communication silos, things were breaking down, faculty were not serviced on either side as best as they could. And so then they shared with me, they reorganized and they just did this in the past year. And this is what their new structure looks like. So they have both pre and post award now reporting up to a dean of a graduate school who reports to the provost, all on the academic affairs side. So this might look similar to some schools that might, instead of a dean of a graduate school, they could have a VP for research. And they're seeing that there's more communication, cohesion, and better service of their faculty with this new model is what they've reported to me. And as I alluded to earlier, another school that I talked to, they said that they happen to be a small school. They don't have a provost. They do have 3 schools, an undergraduate, graduate school, and a law school, and that their office actually reports to the Office of General Counsel because they couldn't really think of another place to put it at their place because they didn't have a provost. So for them, it made a lot of sense. She thought it was a little strange, but it's worked out well for her. She's done very, very well with developing policies, compliance, and that was a focus of theirs, was to really maintain the risk. So as I said, your orientation in terms of being risk adverse has an impact. What I'm showing you on the screen is one example. There are many, and we can probably create something where people can ask me for any examples that I show you in the rest of the presentation. I can provide you. One thing that I did at my institution when I came in right at the beginning, and as we were developing pre and post award, was to develop a roles and responsibilities matrix. And this is sort of all the tasks in that whole life cycle function listed on a spreadsheet, and then meeting with people around campus that are that handle different pieces of these interactions. And figuring out, okay, who's doing this? Are we doing it at all? Because sometimes I've done this and found out we weren't doing important things. Who's accountable from it? Who needs to be informed? And whose responsibility is this? So developing a working group, if you're thinking about a restructure or thinking about a first-time structure, to look at all the roles and responsibilities of sponsored programs and figuring out where it's best going to sit and who's going to be responsible is a good process. I have a couple of examples of these. If anyone wants to contact me outside of this webinar, I'm glad to share one of them. This is my little illustration here from looking at all the reviews I've done across the country. I mean, I've narrowed down some very complicated things to a very simple image. When you have very busy faculty and you don't give them support, you're not going to hit the grant success that you want, right? But if you have faculty, provide incentives, provide trained research administrators, trained research managers that can provide the kind of support they need, you are going to see increased grant success. Some ideas for increasing capacity through incentives are holding grant writing retreats. I just did one. I calculated over the last 5 years, we had a phenomenal return on investment on our grant writing retreat. We've done 8 retreats in 5 years. We've had 40 faculty, 81 faculty that have attended those retreats. We have over half of them have been successful in funding, and I've spent maybe $6,000, and my return on investment has been about 1.8 million from those faculty. So to me, that's a great way. We set up this time at the end of, for us, it's the winter session. I've tried them at different times. Finding the right time is just right, but we provide time and space for them to write, and we provide consultation for faculty during those retreats. We've developed grant writing cohorts that work together throughout the year, providing them time and space to stay together and keep themselves accountable on grants. Seeing some good success with that. We've implemented a grant improvement program. This is not tons of money either, but small amount of money to do outside reviews. So we'll have faculty be able, we're not deep in some of our departments for expertise. We might only have one molecular biologist. So we need someone from the outside who's going to do those reviews. Here, through SURE, you're going to be able to get that support. I didn't have that. So I was trying to kind of create my own SURE by coming out with outside reviews, grant training within their disciplines. I worked with other colleges in the area and created some grant writing training. We encourage faculty to meet with collaborators, and I would fund them to, even if they needed to meet with a program officer before COVID. We provide discretionary funds and incentives to faculty. We have an interesting workload modification program where faculty that are teaching with three undergraduate students can count that as a course within load. I'll say that again because people can't believe it, but I think it's one of the reasons why we've been able to do what we can, because we're so dedicated to undergraduate research. If they work with 3 undergraduate students in a semester, students have to register for a course, it has to be a syllabus, but they're working on their NIH, NSF grants that can be counted in load. It's made a huge difference to what our faculty are able to achieve. And then, of course, internal grant programs, developing seed programs that will get your faculty interested, get them the preliminary data, because without preliminary data, they're not going to be as competitive to sponsors such as NIH. On the screen here is an example. I had some funding that was generously provided by the INBRE program, which is an NIH INBRE program for our research office to develop some funding. Every year, I take a look at what is it that we need to seed or spark within our institution to be able to get more funding. And I come up with a different theme. We've done one on COVID. We've done interdisciplinary research. This past year, we did New Directions grant. And these were small grants in order to get faculty who needed or wanted to move in new scientific or scholarly direction to be able to do that. And it was fun to be able to put that program together and allow faculty to move in some new directions, get preliminary data for other grants. It's really important that we measure an office's success. You'll see, I put together an annual report every year. I set goals. I make sure that my goals for my office are set in advance. I keep myself accountable. I provide this data in a nice little pretty format so that administration can see what kind of impact we're having. And I do have not just quantitative data, but I have stories for administration on the difference that the research has made and that the difference that the students working with the faculty have made, so that we continue to get the investment in the research infrastructure we need, because that investment is what's really going to fuel growing those research dollars. I mentioned the Encourage peer review program, but there are other kinds of programs. Really should consider, outside of doing your own assessment on an annual basis, to occasionally get an external review or external assistance, and to benchmark with peers. I went to my institution and said, who are our peer institutions that you would like? Who's our near peers? Who would you like us to be like in terms of research? And they gave me the list, and I started reaching out to benchmark okay, what are you doing with research? What are the things that you have in place? And I started benchmarking. It was one of the reasons why I got the assistant director, because when I did that benchmark, I realized the only way we're going to get there is everybody else had more staff than we had. You've definitely got to use metrics. So keeping data, your key performance indicators, allow it to guide you. We all have our gut instincts, but the data makes a difference, certainly. It's important that you continually reassess your metrics, because those metrics will change over time and you want to continue to reassess. So for example, I've added over the years different things I was tracking, from number of first-time submitters. Then now I look at humanities versus sciences, because we had a goal of doing more interdisciplinary research. I started looking at that, started looking at the number of students that are involved and engaged. I started looking at the third bullet, use metrics to identify perceived issues. I had some faculty say, oh, I can't apply for a grant, IRB, it's terrible. I can't possibly do human subjects research. Well, I had data on our turnaround times for the IRB, and they said, well, it takes a long time. I said, well, when was the last time you did? Well, it had been 5 years. We'd completely revamped the process, and I had data to show that we turned these things around actually very quickly. So I try to stay ahead by using metrics and try to use data. We do newsletters, all kinds of outreach to faculty. The key here is always assessing where you're at and where you want to be, and assessing that structure at least every 5 years to make sure that it's the right fit for now, but also the right fit for the future. The challenge that I found from going out to many institutions is they really work hard at trying to get the grant, and they might get good marks and they might actually get some, but they haven't really planned for what it's like to have these grants and to have a portfolio, and what that's going to mean for the whole institution. So the messaging is important. Having the institute, having an alignment of sponsored programs with the institutional strategic plan, vision, and mission is important to be able to structure and develop the staff support and services for the faculty. Now, what I didn't talk about, and I'm doing well with time, I have 2 minutes left. Throughout all the processes that we talked about and all the consideration, the key to this is really engaging faculty, really engaging them and having conversations about what they need and what they want. And don't be surprised, because some might not even know what they need. They know what the obstacles are. Our goal is to try to reduce those obstacles, come up with new ideas, solutions, incentives, and try to figure out what we can do to have a support system that are going to allow faculty to flourish, be able to receive these research grants, do the important research, and then work with our students. So with that, I am surprised I'm right on time. I could go on and on forever, but I'm glad to take some questions and feedback if you want to share.
Great. Chris, we have 3 questions in the Q&A box right now, so we'll start with those. If others come up, feel free to continue populating. The first question says, would we be able to get a copy of the roles and responsibilities matrix?
Yes, absolutely. Melissa, what's the best way for me to get those requests?
Maybe easier to
go to me.
Yeah, to go to you directly, unless you think there's going to be a large volume, in which case you can send it to me either way.
Yes, you can send me the, Katie, you can send me the request directly. And I will send that, or anybody else that wants a roles and responsibilities. I have a couple of different versions. I've got a risk management assessment that looks at all the sponsored risk compliance areas. And then I have the just roles and responsibilities, and you can adjust it as you see fit. It's a great, great exercise. It enabled me to have conversations that were uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't really say that. It was very positive, but there are uncomfortable points in growing and developing a research enterprise. And sometimes just having this roles and responsibilities matrix, it forces you to just have the conversations that might be uncomfortable to have because you're working through a process together. So thank you for that question, Katie. And I can see the other questions, Melissa, so I can take them.
Okay.
So the next one was, does the Shore Research Center offer grant reviews of proposals? Oh, maybe that is one better for Brett. Did you or Paul want to take that one?
Yes, this is something, a service that we do offer. We'll provide faculty with reviews of their proposals. We do ask that you provide proposals to us in a timely manner. We have people here at UK in our proposal development office who are experts at reviewing grants. We also have a number of faculty who have expertise in a number of different areas. So you can send those requests to Melissa and she'll make sure that the appropriate eyes get a chance to look at your proposal, and we'll work with you directly with your proposal.
And the next question I have is, how are discretionary funds incentives used to increase capacity? This is a great question. So, and just like anything in research administration, it depends, right? So I'll give you a couple of ideas. Sometimes the discretionary funds, like we'll use it almost like a bridge funding. So sometimes they might fund a student to do an important experiment or a certain piece of preliminary data. And so that helps the faculty be able to be able to move the proposal forward. Sometimes there's certain software that faculty have that our college doesn't provide. So we're able to provide that qualitative or quantitative software or some special device that they might need to be able to get their research done. In terms of incentives, I mean, we could go on and on all day with incentives. Incentives are not just tangible financial incentives. Certainly, I have seen some institutions that have actually paid faculty to write grants. That's not my preferred route. I don't think that's the incentive. I mean, if it works for you, I guess it works for you. I have provided stipends for faculty who have, completed extensive sort of like boot camp kind of things in the summer. And so it just kind of gets people to the table. But it doesn't do it all. It doesn't, like, one doesn't lead to increased capacity. It's another tool in the toolbox, I would say, to add to it. But any kind of flex funding to eliminate those obstacles that faculty have in their research, those kind of discretionary funds and incentives are important. We constantly have publication costs that were getting more and more expensive. For our open access publication costs. So having availability of those funds for faculty to get their publications so that they are competitive when they're going for funding. And if that's not enough, put another question, more specific, and I'll try to answer it better. And then William, you asked, when do you know it's time to ask for more staff? Are you staying up all night, every night? It's time. What I did do when I added the next staff person, I was feeling really stretched. My enthusiasm was starting to fade. I'm a very enthusiastic person too. But the numbers will tell you too. What I did do is I said those peer institutions. So for us, we have a core list. It's Villanova. I mean, I could give you the list, but there's 5 institutions my institution really cares about. I actually ended up calling all of their directors. I had them give me their staffing and proposal volume data. They were very kind to me. I put together a proposal to ask for more based on peer benchmark data. You said, these are our aspiring peers. Here's what they have. There's no way we're going to get there. And you'll know because you'll feel it, right? If you're asking this question, it's probably time. Will this presentation be shared with us later? Melissa, yes.
Yep, we'll post it to our YouTube channel, and it's usually about a 48-hour turnaround by the time we get it downloaded, edited, and then on the YouTube channel.
And then I did have a question about my contact info. I've put my email in the answer. So I think that was Neville. I typed the answer in for you. How do we get our provost and finance VP on board with restructuring our setup? We are hybrid model now and it isn't working. Oh, you're just like that other school I showed you. We are two isolated entities, pre-award reporting to provost, post-award reporting to VP. Very little communication behind both of us. You're not alone. A lot of schools are like this. Like I said, it's working for us, but it takes very special people to make that structure work. So what I would say is how to get them on board. The faculty must feel that there's an issue or problem as well. So one of the ways, and you say between both of us, is I'm going to assume you're a small school and it might only be a few people. I'm sure for me, the way that I have created change is number one, tracking data, et cetera, but then using faculty voice. So if there's focus group of faculty that you can pull together that are actually asking for changes, that's going to go a long way for the VP of Academic Affairs. If you think that there are compliance and research risk issues, that will go a long way. If you both feel the same way, I think both of you coming together, maybe with support of the faculty, will get them to think about that. That's a complex one. You should feel free to, your anonymous, send me if you want to contact me, feel free. I'm glad to set up a conversation with you because that sounds like it can be a tricky thing. And I'm glad to try to listen and help. Christy. A very small PBI. Are you familiar with many resources that support specifically HBCUs, MSIs in their unique circumstances? Outside of the Shore Center itself is a wonderful resource for you. If you mean funding opportunities, yes, there are lots of funding opportunities. If you want to give me a little bit more about what kinds of resources you're looking for funding opportunities or something else, let me know. Rajiv, indirect cost associated with the grant, how is it played and managed? How do we know if the grant allows indirect costs? How is it paid out and managed? So with the indirect costs, that's a very complicated one is what I'll say. If an institution has a negotiated indirect cost rate with the feds, the institution is going to recover that percentage. But what an institution does with it is different depending on each institution's policies. The feds don't really care once it gets recovered. At our institution, we actually do use part of the indirect costs as an incentive for faculty and it's not uncommon for smaller institutions to do that. So we have 10% that goes into a PI discretionary account. Again, it's an incentive to keep coming back, right? The department gets 25, the school dean gets 25, and 30% goes to our overhead. I've seen this all over the map at schools that I've gone to. But many smaller institutions do have a distribution policy. Some do not. How it came to be here was I really worked with our faculty and we approached administration and said, we're going to need to create one to further incentivize faculty who are looking for incentives. And this goes in pools and we use it to further invest in the research enterprise. And then how do you know if a grant allows indirect costs? It should clearly state it in the solicitation. Most all NIH grants do. The research grants most certainly do. Some of them may be restricted if it's a training grant to a lower percentage. But usually you will see it right in the solicitation itself. How many projects are each of the post-award administrators supporting? Dawn, good question. Too many? Because it's really not about the number of dollars, right? I go through this at a lot of institutions. They're like, oh, we're only doing 10 million. We're only doing 5 million, but they're in 85 different small little individual accounts. At our institution, they're probably somewhere around 45 each. We probably somewhere around there, but it's tricky. There isn't really a formula, and it's not all about the dollars. I've had people say, "Oh, I can manage $20 million alone." Well, if you're at a small institution and 50 of them are $2,000 grants, it's just a lot to track. So, yeah, that's the best I can give you for an answer. That's where we are here, but we're stretched. We just added that second person, and we're still feeling like it's a lot to give the kind of service we want to give. We want to give faculty the financial reports, but we also want to be doing projectives. We want to be more proactive. We want to be meeting with faculty quarterly so that we're actively managing awards, not just dealing with financial reports. So if that's the kind of structure that you want, then you have to make sure you have the staffing for it. How am I doing, Melissa, on time?
You're doing
4
great.
minutes. Okay. So 2 in pre-award, 3 in grant accounting. That was probably a response to something I said, but I forgot what it was. Oh, this was the institution with the hybrid, you had a couple in pre-award and post-award and trying to think about reworking. Definitely contact me. You have my email, and let's just talk together and we can have a confidential conversation. I'm new to the negotiations. Do you know of resources to assist with training and mentoring through this process? So the indirect cost negotiations, so I don't even end up doing those myself. We actually hire a consultant here that does our negotiations for us, because we didn't want to develop all the capacity in-house, and it was more affordable for us. I got quotes. So we actually have a consultant that manages all the negotiation for us. You can try SRAI, the Society of Research Administrators, and the National Council of University Research Administrators. Incur different conferences, but I can't think of anybody that will actually help you with the renegotiation itself. If you're looking for consultants, I do have some names that I can provide for you that you could reach out to get quotes. I'm very happy with the one that we used. Okay, Dawn. So Dawn, she asked how many, thank you, Dawn, for that clarification. Dawn had originally asked how many people should be handling the sponsored research portfolio, and she's clarifying that when she wanted to get a sense of when you needed to ask for more support. Dawn, when you're not able to reconcile, invoice in a timely manner, and keep the compliance, you're probably at the time. It's not necessarily just the number of funds. And I would say not just the time, but you have to make sure that you've got people that are trained. And I think that gets us to the next point. I have a question from an anonymous attendee about the CRA credential and whether it's necessary, valuable to somebody starting out. I don't have the CRA myself. Because I had a PhD and I've been in the field a long time. But I do think the CRA is a wonderful credential. I think that this field wasn't really professionalized, right? We become a profession when we get credentialed, right? So now we have this credential. My assistant director, I just supported her and she just received hers. She learned so much from going through the review process. I'm so proud of her. And I do think it's very necessary. Well, I say it's necessary. You can get jobs without it. I do think it's valuable to invest in yourself. And if you have someone that will support you, I think that's wonderful if you could accomplish that. Paul, you had a hand raised. Would you like to share?
No, that's great. I was just going to say that was a terrific presentation. I learned quite a few things, which was awesome. But I do have to go to another meeting, so this is just me saying goodbye.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.
And we have just a couple more questions, so I think we will go ahead and finish those out. If you meet with faculty quarterly, what types of things do you review, and do you do it with every grant? Katie, you got to use your judgment. I would say we don't do it with everyone, but with the larger grants or with the newer investigators, we do that. Our goal is to look at their spending to date and to talk about upcoming plans and goals, whether they have any big purchases, hires, anything that they need help or support with. You know, and they can be quick check-ins, you know, even just a half hour a couple times a year. It helps establish that relationship so that when you do have to say no to them, Katie, sometimes, which I'm sure you do, it's easier to do that after you've had some conversations and you're real people. And then the last question that we have is, do you know of any funding opportunities to build OSP infrastructure and capacity other than the SURE Seed Grant competition? Well, I was going to tell you all about the SURE Seed Grant competition because that's where you should be applying for sure. NIH generally in the past had something called BRAD, and then they had another one, but that no longer exists. I'm not really sure of any other competitions myself outside of the seed, which is why the seed's so needed. You know, maybe there could be something local within your institution. I did mention INBRE in my talk. I happen to be from an INBRE state, and what they do in my INBRE state is they give the sponsored research office a small portion of all the awards that get funded. So I get 10% of all the awards that come to my institution, and that's what I've used to really grow my office. I've been able to invest in software. That's how I fund my graduate assistant, and it's how I've been able to start some creative programs that we've done. One of them we called was that just-in-time program, and maybe I didn't mention it, but we had a need. Faculty just needed the smallest amount of money. Like sometimes it was just $300 for software or some small little thing that was holding up their research, and we had no avenues at the college. We had big internal grant programs, but nothing for those small little things. So we created the just-in-time money with some of these funds to be able to help faculty get them over the edge. And my institution thought it was so successful that they've institutionalized it. So I no longer need the INBRE money to do that any longer. So it was really fun to be able to pilot some of these things and to get those going. So I'm not seeing any questions, and we are at time. So I want to thank you all for coming and for staying, and for the SURE program to put this webinar together and to allow me to speak with you all.
Thanks so much, Chris. We really appreciate your efforts. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.